Hello, today we are going to be reviewing some geometric angles with vertical, adjacent, and complementary and supplementary angles. So let's look at the first part. So number one says to name two angles that are vertical. So if you notice, we have some points that are located on our lines here. So vertical angles mean angles that are opposite of one another. So I can say here angle MPL. So angle MPL. So that's talking about this angle where the 5x is at. The vertical angle to the MPL would be on the opposite side, so where this 85 is at, and we can name it NPO. So MPL is where the 5x is at, and opposite of that would be NPO, so where the 85 is at. Okay, number two, name two angles that are adjacent. So adjacent means right next to each other. So two angles that are right next to each other. So I can say like these two angles right here, so where the 95 and the 85 is at, I just have to name that angle. So I can say angle LPO. So LPO is where this 95-degree angle is at. And then right next to it, I can name it NPO. So adjacent angles are when you have a line, so in other words this line right here, that is connected to both angles, so they share a common side. Alright, so number three says to find the value of x. So there's a couple different ways to do this. The easiest way to do it is to use the vertical angles, since we know vertical angles are congruent, which means that they are equal to one another. So for example, for number three, where it says 5x, the vertical angle to 5x would be the 85. So if I want to solve for x, all that I need to do is just set it equal to 85, and then I just solve it like a basic equation. So to get x by itself, just divide by 5 on both sides, and 85 divided by 5 is 17. So x equals 17. Okay, next is to find the value of y. So we can do the same thing with finding the vertical angle to 5y, since we're trying to get y by itself. So what you guys could do, the easiest way to do it is to take 5y and set it equal to 95, since these are vertical angles, and again we know that vertical angles are congruent. However, I do want to show you guys another way with using adjacent angles. So when you're using adjacent angles, you're looking at two angles right next to each other. So in this case, since I'm trying to solve for y, I'm going to look at this 5y and 85. And when you see adjacent angles, you can add them together. So 5y plus 85. And you want to set it equal to whatever kind of angle they form. So in this case, as you guys notice, if I added the two angles together, they form this straight line right here. So as we know, a straight line is 180 degrees. So I could, to be able to solve for y, I can add my two adjacent angles together and set it equal to that straight line, which is 180. Now we just have a two-step equation to solve. So to get the y by itself, first step is to subtract 85 from both sides. So 180 minus 85 is 95. And I'm going to move it over here. So we're going to be left with 5y equals 95. And then last step to get y by itself is to divide by that 5 on both sides. So 95 divided by 5 is 19. And again, if you were to do it the other way with just setting 5y equals to 95, so notice how that was that step right here, you would still get the same thing. Alright, next part is we need to name each angle in 4 ways and then classify the angle as acute, right, obtuse, or straight. Okay. So to name an angle, you can name it by the number on the inside. So like for this case, I can name it angle 4. You can also label it by its vertex, so just the vertex. So remember, the vertex is where two lines meet at, and that's what forms this angle right here. So I can name this angle angle S, or just like I did up here, we can name the angle with the three dots that form it. So for example, if I'm naming this, your vertex always has to be the middle letter. I can name it RST, or going the other way, TSR. So those are the 4 ways that I can name this. And then what kind of angle is this? So notice how it doesn't have a box, so it's not a 90. It does look a little bit bigger than a 90-degree angle, so I would say that this is a obtuse angle. So acute is an angle less than 90. So acute is less than 90, right is exactly 90, obtuse is more than 90, and straight equals 180. Okay, so let's try number 6. So again, you can name this angle by the number, so I can say angle 2. You can name it by its vertex, so angle Y. Or you can name it by using the 3 letters that form that angle and make sure your vertex is the middle letter. So I can say XYZ or ZYX. Okay, and then notice how this angle does have a box. So when it has the box, that equals 90, which means that this is a right angle. Okay, then the last one over here, so name the angle in 4 different ways. So again, you can name it by its number, so we can say angle 1. The vertex will be the middle letter, so it's right where that 1 is at, so that is B. And then again, I can name it with the 3 letters and make sure B is the middle letter, so I can name it CBA or angle ABC. So going down this way and then back the other way. Okay, and then what kind of angle is this? Notice how it is a straight line, so it's a straight angle. Okay, moving on to the next part. So use the figure at the right to name the following. So I can have 2 acute angles here for number 8 that I need to identify. So again, acute angles are angles that are less than 90 degrees. So the first one that I see here is this angle right here. So I can name this angle JBC. So JBC is an acute angle. And then another one that I can use is just on the opposite side here. So using J and B again, but then just go the opposite way. So JBG. Okay. And next one is to use to find 2 straight angles. So we're just looking for straight lines here. So the first one that I see, I'm going to use a different color to help us out. Again, you just need 3 letters to name it. So first one I see here is FGC, because that forms a straight line. So angle FGC. Okay, then my other one that I can use, another straight line, is I can use this line down here. And my orange pen went out. So I can use this line down here. And notice how I can just label it ABC. So angle ABC. Okay, so next part is I need to name 2 right angles. So I'm looking for where my box is at. So notice how my box is right here. So I can name this angle GBC, because that would form my right angle. So angle GBC. And if you just go the opposite way, that would also form a right angle. So I can name it GBA. All right, and my last one here is naming two obtuse angles. So the first one that I see is down here. So again, just make sure that your vertex is your middle letter. So I have BCH. And then if I go on the opposite side, so it's vertical angle, I see that I have angle GC and D. So it gets kind of hard to visualize once all those lines get in there. So maybe use like a pencil and just trace it, and then when you get done with that, then maybe erase it, because like I said, it does get kind of hard to visualize. Okay. All right, and the last part down here at the bottom is we just need to find the value of x in each figure. So when we find the value of x here, we first need to identify if they are vertical or adjacent angles. And looking at all of these, notice how all of these angles are right next to each other. So we have no angles that are opposite of each other. So all of these angles are going to be adjacent angles. So remember, adjacent angles are angles that are right next to each other and they share a common side. And when we have adjacent angles and we're solving for a variable, remember our task that we are going to do is we are going to add the angles together. Then we are going to set it equal to whatever they form, and in this case it's always going to be 90 or 180. So adjacent angles, you add the angles, and then you're going to set it equal to 90 or 180. So in other words, we are just creating an equation. All right, so look at number 4. So again, we have adjacent angles because we have two angles that are right next to each other and they share a common side. So to be able to solve for x, I'm going to add the two angles together, so 4x plus 22. And I'm going to set it equal to whatever angle they form. So notice how if I were to add the two angles together, they form this right angle. And as we know, a right angle is a 90-degree angle. So all I have to do now is just solve this basic equation. So my first step is going to be to subtract that 22 from both sides. And we get 4x equals, and then 90 minus 22 is 68. And then our last step to get x by itself is to divide by that 4 on both sides, and we get x equals 17. Okay, so then number 5, notice how we have the same exact setup. So we have x plus 2 in this angle and 65 over here in this angle. So again, if I'm trying to solve for x, these are two adjacent angles because they're right next to each other and they share a common side. So to solve for x, I'm going to add them together. So x plus 2 plus 65. And I'm going to set it equal to whatever angle they form. So once again, they form this right angle, which is going to be a 90-degree angle. All right, and now I'm just going to solve it. So notice how on my left side I can simplify 2 plus 65. So 2 plus 65 is 67. And then to get x by itself, I'm just going to subtract the 67 from both sides. And 90 minus 67 gives me an answer of 23. All right, so you guys go ahead and pause the video and try number 6. Okay, so you guys should be done with number 6, so let's see how you guys did. So you guys noticed to solve for x, you had to use its adjacent angle, which was 43. So when you have two adjacent angles, you're going to add them together. So x minus 7 plus 43. And you're going to set it equal to whatever angle they form. So notice how they formed another right angle. So you should have set it equal to 90. And then you guys just had to simplify. So on the left side, I noticed that I have a -7 and a 43 that I can combine together. So 47 plus a -7 will give us a positive 36. And then your last step to get x by itself is to subtract that 36 from both sides. So 90 minus 36 gives us an answer of 54. All right, moving on to 7. So for number 7, again, if I'm trying to solve x and get x by itself, I need to notice what other angle that I have, and the other angle that I have is a adjacent angle because they're right next to each other and they share a common side. So again, if you're solving for x with adjacent angles, you're just going to add the two angle measurements together. So x minus 5 plus 29. And you're going to set it equal to whatever they form. So notice how this time they're forming a straight line. So a straight line is a 180-degree angle. Okay, now I can just simplify. So again, on my left side, I notice I have a -5 plus 29. So I can combine those together. So -5 plus 29 is a positive 24. And then my last step to get x by itself is to move that 24. So the opposite of adding it is subtracting it. So 180 minus 24 gives me a total of 156. All right, number 8. So again, we're trying to solve for x here. And I have two adjacent angles this time, well actually 3. So I have 92, I have x, and I have 78. And notice how if I were to combine all of these together, they once again form another straight line. So if I want to solve for x and I have adjacent angles, I'm just going to add all of these angles together. So I have 92 plus x plus 78. And again, they form a straight line, which is a 180-degree angle. So I can go ahead and simplify. So I can add my two constants. So 92 plus 78 gives me 170. And then my last step to get x by itself is to subtract this 170 from both sides. And I get x is equal to 10. All right, so go ahead and pause the video and you guys try number 9. All right, so you guys should be done with number 9. So let's see how you guys did. So again, if you are trying to solve for x, notice how you need to look for another angle that can help us. So this case we have 72, which is adjacent to x plus 4. So if they are adjacent angles, you're going to add them together. And you need to set it equal to whatever they form. So they form a straight line, which is a 180-degree angle. Okay, so I can go ahead and combine my two constants together. So I can take 72 plus 4 to give me 76. And all that would be equal to 180. And then your last step to get x by itself is to subtract the 76 from both sides. So 180 minus 76 gives me a total of 104. So good job if you guys got that. All right, so now moving on to the back side. So we have some word problems here. So a map shows a railroad crossing and as a highway, as shown below. Which of the numbered angles are supplementary angles? So if you guys remember, supplementary angles means two angles added up. So like angle 1 plus angle 2. So two angles added up, that equals 180 degrees. So supplementary is 180. When we are talking about complementary, complementary means 90. So looking at this picture here, I need two angles added together that equals 180. So it's very similar to what we did down here at the bottom. When we had two adjacent angles, when we added them together, they formed a straight line. So looking at this picture, you could pick two different numbers that would be supplementary angles. The first set of numbers that you guys can use is angle 1 and angle 2, because if you were to add those two together, notice how they form a straight line. So you guys could say angle 1 and angle 2 would be supplementary angles, or going this way, so going the other way, you guys could say angle 2 and angle 3 are supplementary angles. So you could say this one, or you could say this one. Either way, they both form a straight line when combined together. All right, next one. The runways at a local airport are sketched in the figure. Classify angle 1 and angle 2 as acute, obtuse, right, or straight. So looking at angle 1, notice how this angle opens up more than a 90-degree angle. So angle 1 would be an obtuse angle. And then looking at angle 2, notice how angle 2 is smaller than a right angle. So we would say angle 2 is acute. Alright, next one. A ski jump makes an angle of 27 degrees with respect to the water as shown below. How are the 27 angle and the unknown angle related? And then find the value of x. So notice how our wave, I know it doesn't look like a straight line, but notice how it will form this line down here at the bottom. So looking at the two angles here, so x plus 3 and 27, notice how they are angles right next to each other. So if they're right next to each other, they are related by being adjacent. And as we know, when they are adjacent angles, to be able to solve for a missing value, we're just going to add them together and set it equal to whatever angle they form. So x plus 3 plus 27 equals, notice how they're going to form a straight line, and a straight line is 180 degrees. Okay, so we can go ahead and start combining. So 3 plus 27 will give us 30. And then to get x by itself, I can subtract this 30 on both sides, and we get x is equal to 150. So if I were to plug 150 back in, 150 plus 3 is 153, so this angle would equal 153. Alright, moving on to the next one. So the time shown on the clock is 12:07. After 20 minutes has passed, will the angle formed by the hour and minute hands be acute, obtuse, right, or straight? So if it's currently 12:07 and we want 20 minutes to pass, it will now be at 12:27. So my minute hand would go maybe about right here. So notice how it started as an acute angle at 12:07, but as soon as we go 20 minutes to 12:27, notice how it opened it up a lot more, and it now almost is a straight line, but not completely there. So if it's not completely there, we would say that this is obtuse. All right, and the last two questions. So a string or a kite string makes an angle of 48 degrees with respect to the ground as shown below. The dashed line is vertical and the ground is horizontal. How are the 48 angle and the unknown angle related? What is the value of x? So again, I notice here that 48 and 6x are angles right next to each other and they share a common side. So once again, we would say that these are adjacent angles. Okay, so remember, vertical angles are angles that are across from each other, so opposite of one another. But if they're right next to each other, they're adjacent. So in order to solve for x, I'm just going to add these two angle measurements together and set it equal to whatever they're forming. So notice how they don't show a box, but notice how we have a perfect vertical line and a perfect horizontal line that meet. So this would be a right angle here, so we're going to set it equal to 90. Okay, so to get x by itself, I need to first move this 48 by subtracting it. So we get 6x equals 42. And then our last step to get x by itself is to divide by 6. So 42 divided by 6 is 7. Alright, and then moving on to the last one. So the plans for a new aquarium call for 2 hallways of exhibits leading out of a circular main room as shown. What is the value of x? Okay, so once again, I see 2 angles next to each other, so these would be adjacent angles. And when we have adjacent angles to solve for x, we're just going to add them together. So 5x plus 65, and we are going to set it equal to whatever they form. So in this case, they form a straight line, which is 180 degrees. So to get x by itself, first step is to subtract that 65 from both sides. So we get 5x equals 180 minus 65 is 115. And then our last step is to divide by that 5 on both sides, and we get an answer of x equals 23. So the main points to remember here, adjacent angles are angles that are next to each other and they share a common side. And to solve for a missing value, you are always going to add the angles together, and you're going to set it equal to 90 or 180, depending on what they form. So if they form a right angle, set it equal to 90. If they form a straight line, set it equal to 180. Knowing the difference between acute, obtuse, right, or straight. So acute is less than 90, obtuse is more than 90, right is exactly 90, and straight is exactly 180. Also knowing vertical angles. So remember, vertical angles are angles opposite of one another, and knowing that they are congruent. So if you had to solve for x, so for this example, 5x and 85 were vertical, all that you have to do is set them equal to each other, and that will give you your answer. And then the last thing to remember is just knowing how to name angles in 4 different ways, and also classifying them. Okay? So if you guys have any questions, just let your teacher know.